If you reach out to give me a hug, and I like you, I'm going to probably hug you back. And then we each get a hug out of the deal. That's called hospitality. Hospitality exists when you believe that the person on the other side of the transaction is on your side. When you trust that they're on your side. It really starts with the people you work with. In business, I think that the first people who need to receive hospitality are the people who work in an organization. Because if when you come to work, you feel like your colleagues are on your side, your boss is on your side, that people genuinely want to see you succeed, that's probably going to bring out the best in you. And so this is what we call the virtuous cycle of enlightened hospitality.
Welcome to The Knowledge Project, a podcast about better thinking, problem solving, and decision making. I'm your host, Shane Parrish. If you're listening to this, you're not currently a supporting member. If you'd like special member-only episodes, access before anyone else, transcripts, searchable transcripts, and other member-only content, you can join at fs.blog. Check out the show notes for a link. Today I'm speaking with Danny Meyer, the founder and CEO of Union Square Hospitality Group. Danny's behind some of the most acclaimed restaurants in New York City, like Union Square Cafe. He's also the founder and chairman of Shake Shack, which has one of the best burgers around. We talk about hospitality, what it means, how to deliver it, why we're all in the hospitality business, how you scale a feeling, whether he's a bricklayer or a mason, hiring great people, why restaurants that survive more than a year fail, and so much more. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. It's time to listen and learn. Danny, can you briefly tell us how it is that you came to be what you call a restaurant generalist?
I came to be a restaurant generalist really as a reaction to almost backing into being a specific thing called an executive chef. I love cooking. When I decided to get into the restaurant business, it was a time back in the 1980s where it wasn't nearly the acceptable, entrepreneurial career choice that it is today. And there was something in my mind that said, my parents are going to totally reject the idea of me being a restaurateur because that's a sketchy job. But they might accept if I say I'm going to be a chef, because we had started to see some celebrity chefs, Paul Prudhomme, Wolfgang Puck, I remember Jeremiah Tower from the West Coast. We were reading about Alice Waters with Chez Panisse, and I said, there's a bunch of people who I could aspire to. And so I got myself trained a little bit in France and Italy, and just enough to learn that there's a whole lot of people out there who would be a whole lot better than I as a chef, because I don't think I have ADD, but I definitely did not have what it took to just delve singularly into one topic. And meanwhile, what I loved about getting to run a restaurant as a 27-year-old in New York City was I could dabble in everything: writing, marketing, tasting food, tasting wine, learning about all those things, teaching those things, hiring, decor, welcoming guests all day, seating people. I just really loved all aspects of it. And I knew that if I just did one thing, there's a whole lot of other things I would not have gotten to do.
Before you opened your first restaurant, you looked at over 100 locations. I'm wondering what the key ingredients are to a location. How did you think about that?
Well, the location becomes the stage set for the play you're trying to write. And there's a lot about locations that you can change, but there's a lot you cannot change. And you really, really have to understand that. The one thing you can never change about a location is where is it and what surrounds it. You can't go knocking down all the buildings around you. You can't go building buildings where there aren't any. If you want greenery outdoors, tough luck if you're on the wrong street in New York City. So it's really important to understand what is the location saying. How did people get there? How did they feel when they were there? What were they doing before they came to you? And I really have always looked at restaurant spaces the way a winemaker looks at a vineyard, which is that there is a terroir, and the terroir is really in charge. So, for example, if you're a great winemaker in France, you don't wait to read the Wine Spectator to tell you what grapes are in fashion today. You listen to the soil, which says, guess what? We're in Burgundy, and Pinot Noir grows really, really well here. And if you want white, Chardonnay happens to grow really well here too. But don't try Syrah because it doesn't work. If you go to Bordeaux, don't try Pinot Noir or Chardonnay because they're not going to work. And so the same exact thing happens with restaurant spaces. And if you're really observant, the space will tell you exactly what it wants to be. And sometimes what the space says is, don't plant anything here. This place should not be a restaurant. And that happens actually more than not. You wouldn't believe how many times I've looked at restaurant spaces, and the first question I ask myself is, would I want this even if it were for free? And guess what? 98% of the time the answer is no. If it's something I would want, now I got to negotiate to get a deal because, most restaurant leases are very, very long leases, 10, 15, 20 years. And so you're signing up, you're making a big commitment. And again, I'll make another analogy with winemaking. When a winemaker commits to growing a grape in a certain vineyard, they're actually making a 10-year commitment because most vines don't become productive with really good grapes for at least 10 years. So there's a lot we have in common. There's a reason that if you love wine, that you know that there are certain vineyards that make good wine year after year after year. And even in the worst vintages, like the weather was really bad, they probably make the best wine of that vintage. It may not be their best wine, but even in a bad vintage, they'll make a good wine. So now how does that relate to our business? Well, I've always felt that our job is to start by picking the best site. You want to pick a site that has what it takes. It's got bones. It's got a feeling that transports people. That's why people want to go out to eat. It's not just because they don't want to cook or do the dishes. They want to be transported to a social environment. And you ask yourself, can I make something here even before you taste anything? Can I make something that's going to make people feel good just being here? Like, that feeling when you walk into a restaurant and you go, this place, this is going to make me feel good. So you pick your site, and now you've got to pick the right grapes. And in our case, the grapes we're trying to pick are the people who work for us. We want to pick people, whether they're cooks or servers or bartenders or maitre d's. We want to pick people who we believe can thrive in this soil, because that soil that's our culture. And we got to feed our culture, by the way. You got to take care of your soil. You can't just say, okay, that's our culture, see you in 20 years. Culture changes all the time, and you got to keep it healthy. But the next thing you have to do, you got to train those vines. You got to train them so they grow up, so they don't just grow every which way. The next thing you have to do is you've got to prune the grapes that shouldn't be there. If you don't prune some of the grapes on the top, they're going to provide so much shade that the grapes down below aren't going to get the nutrients they need. And furthermore, the ground is going to have to feed so many grapes, it can't do it all. So sometimes there's people we have to fire. In any great culture, you have to do that if you want the rest of the vine to truly thrive. So now you've got great soil, great grapes, well-trained. You've pruned it so it's really, really healthy. And the next thing you have to do is pray for good weather, for a good climate. And we have to do that too. If the economy is horrible, if we get a blizzard or a hurricane, whatever could happen, we have got to make the best wine in that particular vintage. And so it goes. And after doing this year after year after year, vintage after vintage, your business will gain a reputation. I have favorite wineries, and I kind of feel like they don't know how to make a bad wine because they have so much integrity about what they do that it's always a good wine. I really wish people would say that of our restaurants, and it's really hard, and it's what we strive for, but you got to be intentional about it. It all starts with, which vineyard did you select?
Before we started recording, we were talking about the right idea, the right chef, and the right soil. And I think those things come together nicely there. You've said before the basis for everything that you do culture-wise is hospitality, and you've said that we're all in the hospitality business. I'm curious as to your definition of hospitality and how you see us all in it.
Yeah, well, I think we all are in the hospitality business because every one of us is going to succeed when our stakeholders are rooting for our success. And it's going to be a whole lot harder to succeed if people are rooting against our success. So kind of human nature, if you reach out to give me a hug, and I like you, I'm going to probably hug you back. And then we each get a hug out of the deal. That's called hospitality. Hospitality exists when you believe that the person on the other side of the transaction is on your side. When you trust that they're on your side. It really starts with the people you work with. In business, I think that the first people who need to receive hospitality are the people who work in an organization. Because if when you come to work, you feel like your colleagues are on your side, your boss is on your side, that people genuinely want to see you succeed, that's probably going to bring out the best in you. And then you're probably going to do even better things for your customers. And if your customers believe you're on their side and you do great things for your customers, they're going to probably come back for more because it feels good to do business with you. And the same thing goes for your community. When your community sees that you are doing good things for the community, your community is going to root for your success. And then come your suppliers. Like in my business, we always want to get the best fruit, the best fish, the best vegetables, the best wines, the best prices. Our suppliers are going to take exactly as much interest in us as they believe we're taking in them. And when they know we're on their side, they're going to want to see us succeed. It's just human nature. And that leaves us with our investors. And if you got a staff that is all out to win, and you've got customers that are your biggest fans, and they can't wait to come see you do it again, and your community's rooting for you, and your suppliers want you to have the best, do you not believe that you're going to have more left over for your investors than the next guy? And by the way, if you do have more left over, also known as profit, those investors are going to probably end up doing even better things for your employees. They're going to want to invest in more of your growth. And every time you grow, people on your team are going to get promotions and raises. And so this is what we call the virtuous cycle of enlightened hospitality. I think you can see where this works in organizations of all stripes. One of my favorite professional moments was being invited to speak to the National Governors Association, which is a bipartisan group. It's all governors. They wanted to talk about the power of hospitality in government. I was nervous because I was going like, what the heck does a restaurant guy have to do talking to these people? And what you learn is that governors run an organization just like we do in business. They have a staff who works for them. Their customers are probably the taxpayer. They have lots and lots and lots of suppliers. They have stakeholders just like the rest of us, and they need, just like the rest of us, they need their stakeholders rooting for their success. When they deliver the goods, which all starts with how does it feel to work there? What is the working environment like? If you have a winning culture at work, I promise you that the voters are going to have a better experience being on the receiving end.
How do you create that winning culture? I'm curious. You sound like somebody who's put a lot of thought into the curation of this culture and how you grow it. And I'm interested in how you grow it internally, and how do you scale hospitality? Like, how do you scale a feeling across thousands of employees?
Well, culture is a language. It's almost like culture is the brick, but language is the mortar. And it's a common language that actually drives a culture forward. And you see this in any culture you know. You see it in religions, fraternities, you see it in sports teams, you see it in families, you see it in businesses. And what the language does is two things. It clarifies what we intend to do, and it creates a sense of belonging because we all know what this means. I mean, I've seen this when our kids were younger and they went to summer camp. There were languages at these camps or languages within the cabins of the camp. And there could be language via a song. It could have been language via a chant. And I had no idea what they were doing, but I could see that they felt this bond because they knew what that language was. So here's something I think I've learned along the way. Early on in my career, I would have people say, our culture doesn't feel the same anymore. I would melt. I feel like, oh my God, we're failing. It doesn't feel the same around here anymore. And I finally realized, well, you're damn right it doesn't feel the same anymore, and the culture isn't the same anymore, because culture is not something that wants to be contained or maintained. Culture is like a shark. It's constantly moving or it dies. And if you define culture as the way we do things around here, and you're a growing organization, well, of course you have to be doing things differently. You have to do things differently around here. The one thing that must not change is your value system. That's your compass. And north always has to be north, and west has to be west, and east has to be east. But your culture does have to change. And so the question is, how do we do things around here? Well, I better start off by telling people what our values are, because that's what supports our culture, which will change. And I better tell people how we need to behave while we're doing it. That's my job. And I better hire people who say, I want to work in a place where people behave that way. I want to work in a place that has that kind of values. And now I want to work in a place where I can use my heart and my mind to evolve the culture for the purpose that company exists. So now you're asking a really important question, which is, how do you scale culture? And I would say, I may have a job for the rest of my life if that's what I'm working at, because it's that hard to do. Now, in our industry, the most successful person at scaling systems was Ray Kroc. Whether or not you eat at McDonald's, you'd have to say that it's for the first time in the world somebody could get French fries to taste exactly the same way on every continent of the world. That's not easy to do. Well, what we do will never, ever be anywhere close to as large as McDonald's. But I can also bet you that Ray Kroc didn't spend a lot of time thinking about how do you scale a feeling. He was very interested in how do you scale technical systems. We want our French fries, metaphorically, whatever it is we're serving, we want it to taste consistently good. But I'd say maybe even more importantly for us, we want it to feel consistently amazing. We want the human experience, the human exchange. That's our culture. How we do that has to change, because as we grow, it becomes more and more about how did we advance our culture? How did we use our growth to advance our culture? As opposed to how do we worry that our growth is going to prevent us from maintaining our culture? And the way we do that is to make sure that we're very intentional about who the culture carriers are, what are the emotional skills that we need to promote, because every time someone gets a promotion, the rest of the organization is watching very carefully and asking, so that's who I have to be if I want to get a promotion in this company. That's how I have to behave. That's what kind of values I have to put out there. And every time we get that wrong, we actually set ourselves back many, many fold.
What are those 6 emotional skills that you hire for?
It's going to sound like second grade stuff because it's really obvious, but I'll tell you one thing. I've been doing this for a long time, and every time we take our eye off these 6 obvious emotional skills, our batting average goes down quite a bit. We want to get 100% employee, just like our employees want us to be 100% boss. Now, I never get 100 on my test as a boss. I'd be really, really happy to get something in the mid-90s, believe me. If I could have brought home an A- on my report card, straight A-, my parents would have sure been proud, because I didn't do that. But the way we ideally get to 100, 49 of those points are going to be how well someone does the job they do. How good of a cook are you? If you can make the best bowl of pasta I've ever had in my life, you get 49 points. That leaves 51 points if you want to get 100. And the 51 points are all going to have to do with your HQ, your hospitality quotient, which is the degree to which you are happier yourself when you make someone else feel better. It has nothing to do with how good of a pasta cook you are. It has everything to do with what are your motivations behind the amazing technical skills you have. I need them both. So here's what the 6 emotional skills that we always see at a very high level when someone's got a high HQ. The first one is optimistic kindness. Now it's kind of a twofer. I can look in someone's eyes and tell you whether they have kind eyes or not, because they've been using those eyes their entire life to express emotion. You cannot lie in an interview if you don't have kind eyes, because I can see that you have not been smiling for a good deal of your life. I can see that you may worry a lot. I can see you may be angry a lot, but I'm looking for kind optimism. And the reason optimism is important, over and above your being a great cook, I want to know that your actions can make the world better, can make me feel better. Skeptics tend not to thrive in the world of hospitality. I think there's a role for people who are good at managing risk, but that's different than approaching a situation from the outset, as that old cartoon character would say, it'll never work. That's not going to probably work. So kind optimism, number one. Number two, curiosity. Can't overstate how important it is. I want people on the team who are not a finished product, who look at every day as an opportunity to learn something new. The kind of people who, in Manhattan, even though they walk to work every day, they find a different block to walk on because they might just learn something new. Tomorrow they look up at the cornices instead of down at the sidewalk, or they look across the street as opposed to the same side of the street because they just might learn something new. Intellectual curiosity. Number three, work ethic. I want someone who, in addition to learning how to do the job well, cares deeply about doing that job as well as it can be done. These are people who have a very sensitive excellence reflex. People with an excellence reflex see something that could be better and they fix it. They don't just walk right by because it matters to them. And the fourth emotional skill is empathy, which is a sense that you're able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and ask yourself, hey, if that were me, I might want this. And real empathy actually rejects the old golden rule. The old golden rule says, do unto others as you would have done unto you. The hospitality golden rules, which is driven by empathy, says, do unto others as you believe they would want done unto them. It's a subtle but very important difference if you try to walk in their shoes. Fifth is self-awareness, which is an understanding that we all have different drives and we all feel different every single day. And I would define self-awareness as understanding my own personal weather report for a given day. Just as the weather is slightly different every single day of our lives, I don't think I've had two exact same weather days in my life. So too is my personal weather report. Some mornings I wake up tired. Some mornings I wake up full of energy. Some mornings I wake up nervous. Some days I wake up like I can go conquer the world. It's important, if you're going to be a member of a team, to know what your own personal weather report is, because you will be either raining on other people or shining on other people or creating humidity for other people. And unless you're aware of where you are, you're going to probably be impacting the rest of your team in ways that you did not intend to. And then sixth is integrity, which is having the judgment to do the right thing, even when it may not be in your self-interest, and even when no one else is looking, and caring about doing the right thing. So now you go, all right, cool, I've got a pretty tough job in my business trying to find someone who's a really, really good pasta maker. And now you're going to tell me that they made the best pasta in the world and they only get a 49 on their test. And I'm going to say, yep, because in addition to making great pasta, I need that person to be friendly, optimistic, curious, have a great work ethic, have empathy for other people, be very self-aware, and have integrity. And you're going to go, good luck. And I'm going to go, that's right. And wait till you see how our cuvee of grapes tastes when we make wine out of it. It's going to blow your socks off.
What I like about these is like all of these skills can be learned, but they can't really be taught. They don't show up on paper. How do you, is there key questions that you've learned to ask people that are revealing, especially around sort of work ethic and empathy and curiosity? How do you figure out who has them and who doesn't?
Well, let's go back to the first thing you said. I'm not sure they can be learned, and I'm not sure they can be taught. I think we can teach people how to identify them in others. I'm sure that we can teach people how to celebrate them when they see them happening. And I actually believe that This is a classic bell curve population. I think that there is a tiny population that has these emotional skills, in such abundance that you could lock them in a closet for 30 years and they would come out whistling Dixie. Tiny population. And I think there's a tiny population of people who don't really care about making other people feel better, ever. The vast majority live in the middle of the bell curve, and when they go to work, they genuinely want to do a good job. They genuinely hope that their work becomes part of a winning team. The thing that can be taught is to be very, very articulate and purposeful about why you are hiring for those skills. I talk about this in an opening interview with someone. We make this part of our performance reviews. And when we see these behaviors come to light in a big way, we celebrate them. And in a way, what that's trying to do is to look at the field of people on our team almost as if they're a field of sunflowers, and they will turn wherever the sun is shining. If you constantly shine your light on those emotional skills, you'll feed the flowers, and you'll get much, much more success from a team that genuinely wants to do that. I don't know how to measure it. We would love to get to that point where we could actually measure HQ. HQ, by the way, hospitality quotient, is the term we give to this compendium of 6 emotional skills, where for people who have them at a very high level, those are people who tend to be happiest themselves when they're making other people happy via the thing they do. It's really important for me to say this. I know lots and lots of people who don't have a very high HQ, and I can love them a lot and not want to hire them. There's a lot of people who are not primarily motivated by how much better they can make other people feel. But I'll say one thing. In a day and age where we're all in, where what you know how to do can be so easily copied by everybody, I really believe that 51%, which is how do you make people feel while you're doing it, can truly become the alpha that can differentiate different organizations and teams.
I want to come back to that in just 1 second, because it sounds like there's 3 things that you can scale. You can sort of scale your product, you can scale your service, and you can scale a feeling. And the feeling is the most tricky. Even though product is extremely difficult to have replication all over the world across different cultures and different continents and having a similar taste. It sounds like removing people that don't have a high HQ would be a huge component to how do you identify the people that, we made a mistake with these people and we should move on quickly?
Yeah, I'm actually not great at that. I'm trying to get better at it, but the good news is you can tell your culture is working when the frontline people who work with that poor hire, or it may not be a poor hire, it's just somebody who's not working out, the culture tells you pretty quickly, and they spit them out. And you can tell just how strong the culture is. Now, as a leader, I try to be, number one, self-aware. One of the things I'm aware about is that I definitely am loyal to people who are trying hard to learn. You got to be careful that you haven't created a cult. A cult can be exclusionary to everybody else who's not the same. That would be horrible in a business. That would absolutely be the kiss of death to have a team of people where everybody believes the same things, behaves the same way, comes from the same backgrounds. One of the things I'm aware about is that I will stick with people longer in belief that they can actually thrive within the culture of enlightened hospitality. And I have seen many, many people come into our company who came from different cultures, and they had to learn a new language, and not everybody gets it right off the bat. Now, we've learned something that works very, very well. This is born out of my own self-awareness that I have sometimes stuck with people too long. I'm not the quickest to pull the trigger because I believe in people's goodness and I believe in people's capacity to grow. But something that we learned from some friends in the restaurant business, actually, was to create a 4-quadrant chart. On the x-axis, you would have on the left side can't, and as the x-axis moved over, it would say can. And then on the y-axis at the top, it would say won't, and at the bottom it would say will. And so you now have 4 different quadrants. And one is can't and won't. One is can't and will. One is can and won't. And one is can and will. What we did, which was incredibly helpful in terms of, really helping to manage the emotion out of some of these decisions and really take a good look, is to assign for every one of those 4 quadrants both an action step and a tenure, time frame. So, for example, can and will, that's the easiest one there, but it still has an action step, which is celebrate. Because I've met a lot of people who will and can, they've got great attitude and lots of competence. In an organization, there can be a tendency to take them for granted. You got to celebrate, shine the light, because that's going to pull others over. And the time frame is forever. Okay? Now, if you have someone who can but won't, which is, come on, for someone who's as good as you are at what you do, why are you being such a schmuck while you're doing it? Why will you not do it according to the behaviors we expect of people in this organization? And that's a category that often gets a free pass in a lot of organizations. And they shouldn't be there. I don't care how good you are at something, but we're all really good at making excuses and saying, oh my God, we can't get rid of Johnny because no one is as good as Johnny is at accounting. And the fact is, you cannot afford to keep Johnny because he is making me look like a fool every time he behaves in a way that's contrary to my stated values and behaviors. He is actually making everybody else look at me like I'm full of it. And that's on me at that point. So for someone who can and won't, we put the fire under their rear end. And we will do that for probably 90 days. And that's basically saying it would be a crime for you not to figure out how to behave the right way because you're so damn good at what you do. And by the time you get to 90 days, it'd basically be a conversation that sounded like, this is really hard because you're so good at what you do, but I've just run out of coaching techniques and I don't have anything more I can give you to help you get to that place. So it's been great, but you're not going to be able to work here anymore. The can't and won't is pretty easy. That should not be more than a 30-day time frame. That was probably just an unsuccessful hire altogether. The can't but will, that's, in my opinion, somebody that I'm willing to give, 120 days. I'm willing to give that person a really, really good shot because that's a competence issue. And it could be that I've hired the right cultural fit for the wrong job. And maybe this person who's not thriving at shortstop would be amazing in right field. But I gotta try a couple other things before I'm willing to crumple up that piece of paper and toss it in the trash can. So that one's going to get a ton of coaching, ton of teaching, and a lot more time than some of the others.
I really appreciate you going into depth there. When it comes to the Johnnies of the world, the fact that you used a timeline is really interesting to me because when it comes to the Johnnies of the world, I find that the people that tolerate them the most tend to be super short-term oriented people. Long-term oriented people know that this goes nowhere. It ultimately implodes. It destroys the culture. It falls apart. It's not a win-win. It's not sustainable. Short-term people are like, oh, this will help me make the quarter. This will help me make the month.
Fully agree.
When it comes to scaling, I was thinking about this because you have a variety of different restaurants that you've created. I can't really decide if you're a bricklayer, a mason, or both. So hear me out here. You have these smaller restaurants that don't really scale. You couldn't open them in every city or every corner around the block. And then you have something like Shake Shack, which I love, by the way, which is about scaling not only production, but service and feeling across a variety of different cultures, hundreds, if not thousands of locations. Size tends to move people to treat employees almost like bricks, right? They have a standard shape and size. You have standard processes. And a good bricklayer can sort of lay 1,000 bricks a day. A mason, on the other hand, with a lot more tools and different experiences, might lay half as much working with field stones because they're not shaped the same. They're irregular. They're a bit more of a puzzle. So cutting, shaping, and pairing them is a lot of work. And some organizations tend to build with bricks and some with field stones. It seems like you're almost doing both. If you want repeatable and fast, you tend to use bricks. If you want unique, use a mason. One has employees that are uniform and fit sort of low tolerances for deviations, and the other allows for more personality and character, allowing people to complement one another. And your spectrum of offerings has me wondering to what extent you see yourself as a bricklayer or a mason.
No, I love your distinction, and I definitely, I'm fascinated by both. And it reminds me of a story, which is that 15 years ago or so, I was approached by a gentleman from Tokyo whose family business called Wonder Table. They were in the restaurant business, the real estate business, theaters. He wanted to bring one of our restaurants to Tokyo as a license. And we ended up doing something called Union Square Tokyo. It's now called simply UST because it's never really been Union Square Cafe. There's only one of them. And this is a company that has multiple units of several of its own restaurants. His name is Taka-san. I asked Taka-san up front, why was he so interested in working with us? And his answer, I think, addresses your question a little bit. He said, we're really trying to learn about hospitality. And it's something that you guys do in America way, way better than we do. But on the other hand, we do service a lot better than you do. He said, I'm going to make some generalizations here, but when you come to Tokyo, and I've now done it at least 3 times, he said, if you look at someone in a department store or an art museum in a certain way, they will bow, whether or not you want to be bowed to, because that's how we've been taught it's supposed to be done. We are great at regimentation. We will do the same thing the same way every time once you teach us how to do that. I bet if you give us one of your recipes, we can cook that recipe at least as well as your cooks can. If you give us a piece of music, we can play that piece of music as well as you've ever heard it before. And he said, but there's a reason that we are very taken by jazz, which is uniquely American, because what you do better than we do is improvisation. And that's what jazz is. You all agree on a song, but then you give everybody in that band an opportunity for self-expression, also known as a solo, and you never know how it's going to come out. And that solo is often a dialogue with the audience. And so every single performance is slightly different. We don't know how to do that in Japan. And he said, if we do something together, the thing that we want to learn from you is how to improvise so that we customize the experience for each guest. And the thing maybe you can learn from us is some systems so that you can make your restaurants more consistent. That story is an illustration of my answer to you, Shane, which is both. I want to always try to do things more consistently well, but I always want to customize the experience for you because the 2 words for you are always present in a true hospitality experience. It's the difference between an off-the-rack suit and a custom suit just made for you. The only way that you can feel like I'm on your side is if I customize it for you because you're different than everybody else in the world. The temperature that you like is different than everybody else's temperature. The lighting is different. The sound is different. The level of salt is different. Everything. The pace of the meal is different. So every single thing we do begins with a pretty regimented, off-the-shelf experience. It better be a damn good one. But now we have to listen with every one of our senses, our eyes, our ears, our hearts, to try to understand, okay, it's standard that the food is going to take this long, but I see that Shane wants it quickly. It's standard that the meat comes with this vegetable, but I see that Shane is allergic to that, the nuts that are in that vegetable, whatever. This is where we want to be masons and bricklayers both. And the thrill, I think, in creating Shake Shack, which was, we didn't have a second Shake Shack for 5 years, by the way. We had one Shake Shack for the first 5 years. And, the next 300 plus Shake Shacks have all happened in the 16 intervening years after that. Or maybe the 11 years after that. Yeah, I think I got my math wrong. So this notion of laying bricks and being a mason, I actually like the blend of that. And I think that is partially why Shake Shack has succeeded, is that it's a fine dining version of a fast food restaurant. I call the category fine casual because I don't know too many situations where you've had a mashup of all these people who started Shake Shack came from restaurants like Union Square Cafe and Gramercy Tavern and the Modern, and they learned systems necessary to scale a business, which is very different than people who come from the quick serve industry who have those systems down pat, who are then trying to learn how to retrofit philosophies and choices that a full service restaurant makes in terms of site location, design, hiring, culinary technique, sourcing, community relations, all those kinds of things.
In fairness, that reference between the two, a friend of mine gave me that framework to think about things, and I thought it was an interesting lens to put on top of this conversation. And it almost sounds like you want systems in the back end and then judgment to apply the Mason sort of quality coming out the front end. So you have this off-the-shelf offering, which is setting that's the table stakes, or sort of like setting the bar, and then you apply judgment to that. But that's so dependent on finding the right people, which is why I love your sort of way of hiring. I want to come back to something you said there, which is, why did it take so long to open the second Shake Shack? In this world of scale, rapid, go fast, walk me through that.
I've shared this story before, but it's true that having watched my own father, who was my entrepreneurial role model, experience two different bankruptcies. One when I was 10 or 11 years old, and then another one when I was in my 20s. I just always, probably incorrectly, but for whatever reason, I always associated those bankruptcies with expansion. It seemed to me that they happened when he was growing his business, sometime to other cities, to other countries even. And I just never, ever, ever wanted that to happen. I was okay with taking the risk of being an entrepreneur in a way that I almost couldn't contain. I think I've spoken with enough entrepreneurs to really believe this analogy that it's almost like having a mosquito bite and someone telling you you're not supposed to scratch it. You just don't have a choice. You can try everything possible, but at a certain point, you're going to give in and go crazy on it. And that's how I was with being an entrepreneur. But I wanted to take a risk that was safe at the same time. And I believed that if I ever expanded in any way, never mind doing a second version of something, that it would be the end. And that's why it took me 10 years to open my second restaurant, which was Gramercy Tavern. And that's definitely why it took 5 years to open a second Shake Shack. It just was never part of... Shake Shack wasn't born for the purpose of being a multi-unit operation, never mind a public company, never mind a global company. But the way I've been able to deal with that, well, the first thing is that my dad died at a very young age. He was 59. And when he died, I was 32. So from the time I was 32 on, I did probably what anyone would have done at that point, and I got myself some therapy, some analysis, and I realized something pretty obvious. I'm not my dad. Point number two, not every business that has grown or scaled has gone bankrupt. So those are two pretty important things to come to terms with. And then I started saying, all right, so it's not predestined that I'm going to end up like my dad. It's not predestined that scaling equals bankruptcy, and that there's some pretty good principles to put into play to help with that. One is, since it wasn't just growing, what was it that led to those two really, really tough failures? The biggest one was he didn't surround himself with enough talent to compensate for his weaknesses and to support his strengths. He had both. And so I've made an absolute point of understanding both my strengths and my weaknesses and hiring in a compensatory way, and hopefully making a great work environment for really talented people who know how to do things I only wish I could do. But I love learning. I love learning what they know how to do. And I think together we help make each other better. So that's been a big deal for me always. And I've learned to trust. I've learned to trust both of those things. I'm not my dad. I got some really good things from him. So last thing I want to ever do is sell my late dad down the river. But he never met a good idea that he didn't think he could add something to. And I definitely have that. He never met a good plate of food or a good glass of wine that didn't make him want to take a taste. He never met a good trip that he didn't want to take somewhere to go learn about other cultures and about other people. He was a remarkably good writer and something I strive to do, and I'm not anywhere close to as good as he was. And finally, he was an amazing linguist. He was actually recruited by the Army's Special Language Program in Monterey out of college and recruited to be a counterintelligence officer stationed on the border of France and Germany because of his foreign language skills. And I think foreign languages are so important. It's almost to a person what learning to be a scuba diver is for a swimmer. You see a whole new world when you learn someone else's language that you otherwise didn't even know existed. So I just want to be really clear that with all the cautionary lessons that I think I took from my dad, I also took a lot of amazing gifts.
One of the questions I have about restaurants is that if you make it past the first year, which I think is the hardest sort of milestone, there's a lot that survive to 6, 7, 8 years, and then they fail. Why do restaurants that survive tend to fail?
I think restaurant economics have always been challenging, but never more so than probably the last, 10 years or so, especially in cities where there are many, many restaurants. There's been downward pressure on your pricing ability, but meanwhile, lots and lots of upward pressure on your prime costs, which are talent, real estate, and your food and beverage product. And those prices just keep going up every single year, but the ability to charge appropriately hasn't. And I think the biggest area that our industry has failed at is to educate the public that we are a people business and we have been underpaying people for many, many years. We've somehow in the fine dining world have taught people to pay up for better quality ingredients. You take Shake Shack even. You cannot compare the prices of Shake Shack to any fast food without smiling, because we've educated the public that all natural beef, i.e. beef raised without growth hormones or antibiotics, with proper animal husbandry, costs a lot more than your run-of-the-mill fast food burger. And people understand that and they're willing to pay for it. But we haven't succeeded at doing that with people. And as cities, states, and now the entire country move to a higher minimum wage, and then perhaps one day, one wage for everybody as opposed to a second tier for tipped employees, which I believe is not going to last forever, can't. You're going to start to see restaurant prices go up, as they should, because we cannot be an industry that is really good at giving people their first job and really bad at promoting people to a job that pays a fair living wage. We just cannot be that industry. We do too much good for so many communities. We have to make it so that to be a sustainable industry, we're doing good things for the whole economy. And I think that what COVID exposed in our industry was that we were like that elderly patient with pre-existing conditions that probably would have died pretty soon anyway, and all it took was COVID to knock us out. And you'll see that when this industry does come back, it's going to come back different. And for keeps, I really believe that. I think that it's going to be a more diverse community of workers. I think workers will be paid better. And I think that the public is going to understand that the true cost of dining out includes doing the right thing for people, not just for animals and not just for plants.
I like that a lot. I like the idea, like if you're working in the community, you should also be able to live in the community in which you work. And so often the case in large cities anyway is that police, teachers, people who work in restaurants, they're all getting priced out of the communities that they serve. And I think that doesn't create a long-term win-win for anybody.
You're so right.
You call mistakes the greatest renewable resource on Earth. I'm curious as to how we better learn from our mistakes. And I think you have sort of the 5 A's of making mistakes, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, well, the reason I call it the greatest renewable resource on Earth is that as a human being, we were obviously programmed to just make mistakes all day long. I made about 5 mistakes just trying to get on this podcast with you. And the question is, all right, since we make so many mistakes, what are we going to do with them? And assuming they're honest mistakes that don't lack integrity, how do you end up in a better spot for having made a mistake and addressed it really well than if you had never made the mistake in the first place? That's what I want to try to figure out. In other words, if human mistakes are like waves in the ocean, there's always another one. You just don't know how big it's going to be or what the timing is going to be. How do you use that for good? How do you use that recurring resource for good? And so we came up with what we call the 5 A's of mistake making as a way to teach our team members. The first thing is, don't be ashamed you made a mistake. I'm talking about honest mistakes now. If you made a mistake that lacked integrity, you should not have a job with us. So I'm leaving those aside, but believe me, there's plenty of honest waves in the ocean, plenty, and they don't stop. So the 5 A's of mistake making are: be aware. That's the first one. If you're not aware, you're nowhere. I've made many, many mistakes that I didn't even know I made. And the person on whom I made the mistake might have been carrying around a bad feeling for years. I mean, I've walked by tables in our dining room and inadvertently knocked into someone's menu that then knocked into their champagne glass that then spilled on their lap and didn't even know I had done it. I was unaware I had done it until a waiter sheepishly came up to me to say, Danny, you just spilled on table 44. So first thing, be aware. Number 2, acknowledge it. Number 3, apologize for it. You wouldn't believe how many people, when they make a mistake, they try to hide, they try to run, they deny, they blame someone else. No, that's just not how you do it. So 4th, act on it. In other words, fix it. And number 5, apply additional generosity. So ask yourself, if someone had just spilled champagne on me, what would I want them to do for me besides apologize and acknowledge it? Okay, now the obvious thing is pay for my dry cleaning, get me some club soda, offer me a new glass of champagne. I want you to do something additional on top of that. I want you to believe that this mistake is something that the person you did it to is going to tell the whole world. Hey, how was dinner at Union Square Cafe? It was good, but you know what happened? Danny Meyer spilled champagne all over me. They're going to tell everybody. So now I want the outcome of these 5 A's to lead to what I call writing a great next chapter. Because when they tell the whole world that story about what Danny Meyer did to them, I want them to say, but do you know how he handled it? And if you do that, you have now put that mistake, you've turned that mistake into additional energy that is going to actually propel your business because of how well you took a negative and turned it into a positive.
I tell my kids that all the time. It's not the mistake that sort of does you in. It's how you handle it at the end. And I like how you specifically ruled out integrity. And you said mistakes of integrity are a different beast. I have a friend who has a saying, which is forgive everything but malicious intent. And I feel like that's a really good way to live life. Danny, I want to thank you so much for your time today. This conversation has been amazing.
Well, I've enjoyed being with you, Shane, and thanks for sharing me with your listeners.
Can we get a Shake Shack in Ottawa, by the way? Hey, one more thing before we say goodbye. The Knowledge Project is produced by the team at Farnham Street. I want to make this the best podcast you listen to, and I'd love to get your feedback. If you have comments, ideas for future shows or topics, or just feedback in general, you can email me at shane@fs.blog or follow me on Twitter at shaneaparish. You can learn more about the show and find past episodes at fs.blog/podcast. If you want a transcript of this episode, go to fs.blog/tribe and join our learning community. If you found this episode valuable, share it online with the hashtag The Knowledge Project or leave a review. Until the next episode. Danny, can you briefly tell us how it is that you came to be what you call a restaurant generalist?
Oh, I'm so. If you reach out to give me a hug, and I like you, I'm going to probably hug you back, and then we each get a hug out of.